Hey, what's up, y'all? It's Pat with Texas Freshwater Fly Fishing again, back at you with another Tuesday tie video. Today we're going to continue this little video series on these nighttime flies that I started last week. Today we're going to be tying up what I call the Midnight Muddler. It's a version of a muddler minnow, but the material is a lot different. Y'all might have saw my video on how I tie my muddler minnows before. This one follows that same pattern to an extent, but it's a completely different material list, so be sure you check that out. But I tie this fly up in 3 different colors, kind of like I tie the Midnight SMP into the same 3 color patterns. I'll go the Midnight Chartreuse, a Midnight Wine, and my favorite is just this Midnight Black. But be sure you check out TexasFreshwaterFlyFishing.com for more information on these flies and others. If you were interested in purchasing these, they are going to be available on Flydrology.com for a short time while supplies last, so be sure you check that out. And if you're liking these videos, if you're getting anything out of it, be sure you hit the like button for me, guys. Make sure you subscribe. Really helps me out there, and share these videos with your friends. Let them know about it. But here we go. Let's go ahead and get to tying what I call the Midnight Muddler. So to start with, for this version of my Midnight Muddler minnow, I use a 4X long, kind of a downturn eye hook here. I'm tying it in a size 4 today, which is what I usually tie it in. I can tie it a little bit bigger, a little bit smaller, but typically I like a size 4. It's bigger than the regular muddler minnows that I throw during the daytime on these Texas rivers, but you know, you can vary it for where you need. But anyway, so we start with this 4X long hook, and to start with, we're going to take black thread. It's nighttime, almost everything's black on this fly. The dark colors create a really good silhouette for the fly against the moonlight, so makes it easier for the fish to find when it's these dark colors in darker water situations. It doesn't have to only be at night, guys. Like, I like to throw these in any real dark cloudy days, or anytime the water is real murky and dark. Sometimes I'll throw these. That dark color really stands out good and creates a good silhouette. It's also going to be a bigger profile fly, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. So anyway, I wrap down to just past the point in the hook. Okay, so we'll start about halfway with our thread, wrap to just past the point, and then we're going to take some black bucktail. Okay, and you're going to take yourself a chunk, a pretty good chunk. I like a lot of material on this fly, so we'll take a pretty good chunk. You can use some of the shorter fibers here for the tail. You don't have to, but take a pretty good chunk. I usually go, you know, maybe about the size of a pencil to start off with. A lot of these are going to be kind of cleaned out, but grab it, clean out a lot of those really short hairs and any fuzz. You can try to stack your hairs a little bit if you want to. You don't have to be too picky about it. Go ahead and kind of get those a little bit even. Make sure it's good and cleaned out. And then we're going to tie this in. This is the start of our tail. And I usually make my tail about as long as I make my hook, right? So again, I'll pinch it there, clean it out. About as long as I make my hook. So we started with about the size of a pencil, but I've narrowed it down to about half that size on this thread now. So we'll go ahead and make a couple loose wraps. I found a couple loose wraps a little bit better, and then start tightening down with a few more wraps towards the end of where your material is. And it's going to want to spin on you, so just kind of be careful with it. And we'll clean it up. Clean it up a little bit. Don't have to be perfect on this cleaning here. But I like to take a little bit of super glue to help hold this in place. Not a lot, just a little bit of super glue. Put a drop on there. And then I'll make a few more wraps. Kind of help keep it from spinning and keep it locked down. Because that is a lot of material to tie on right there. All right, so get that tied on. There you go. The next thing I do is I'll take these black rubber legs. Now this isn't the silly legs, the thin silly legs that I use for most flies. This is actually bass skirt jig material. I wanted a heavier material that created more disturbance in the water, because that's what this is all about. It's all about creating a disturbance. It kind of gives me a little splash when it lands. The fish can hear it, find it, and then it's gonna push a lot of water as you fish it. So I'll cut off 2 strands. I double it over to where they're about even. They don't have to be perfect. Then we're going to take these 4 rubber strands in about the same length as the hairs on the tail. We're going to tie it in with the 4 ends facing backwards. Okay, so we'll give it a couple wraps here. Get those facing backwards, and then these facing forward, I'm going to leave them facing forward, and I trim it to just about where the eye of the hook starts. And those are going to end up facing forward. If you want to try to take 2 and pull them apart a little bit, I'll show you here. You can kind of take them and pull them apart a little bit so they stick out to the side. You know, that's not a bad idea too. That's usually what I try to do. Okay, so we have those there. The next thing we want to do to tie in on the tail is get some peacock curl. I like to use this purple dyed peacock curl on this. So you'll see here how that's going to work. We're going to take 4 strands of peacock curl of about the same length. 1, 2, 3. And 1 more. Okay. So we're going to get our 4 strands of peacock curl. Kind of get all the ends about the same length. Dropped one. Get our ends about the same length, and we're going to stack that on top of the rest of our material. So we want those to go just about the length of the tail, maybe slightly longer than all the other material on the tail. And I'll take just a couple light wraps to hold those in. I don't go too tight on these because sometimes that thread can cut it. That's it. Okay. The next step, I roll it over, turn my fly over in the vise, and we're going to get this purple wire ribbing that we're going to use for the rib of our fly, the ribbing of our fly. So I'll take my thread, forgot about this, take my thread back in front of all my material, all the way to the front where I started my thread. And there is where we're going to tie in our ribbing. We can hold the material back, and we're going to tie our ribbing on the bottom side of the hook. Tie that in there. Try to keep it straight along the bottom shank of the hook. A couple more wraps there. Once you get about where it starts, you can bring it to the other side of your material. And then we're going to make a few wraps here to keep this wire down at the start. Rotate your vise back over. All right, now once we got that ribbing tied in, we got it flipped back over, we're gonna go ahead and bring our thread back up to where we started it, about halfway up the hook shank, and we're gonna tie in with the body. We're gonna take this peacock curl, grab all 4 strands, and we're gonna wrap 1 wrap in front of our legs. Take 1 wrap in front of the legs, and then the rest we're gonna wrap, pull them back, and wrap behind. We're going to create the body of the fly with this peacock curl. Kind of gives it an iridescent look if any light hits it. I kind of like it. And again, I use this purple dyed for this midnight black pattern or version. I like purple and black at nighttime. Like I said, it's good anytime. But all right, so wrap that on, tie it off. Just a couple wraps to keep it in place. Trim it up, being careful not to trim your legs. Those legs are... There we go. All right. Now we'll just take our wire ribbing and we're gonna go the opposite direction of where we wrapped our peacock curl. Do 1 wrap in front of the legs and then 1 wrap right behind. 3 wraps, 4 wraps, and we're gonna tie it off. Tie off our ribbing. Break it off, and there you go. So that's the tail and the body of our Midnight Muddler right there. Now we're gonna start tying on the wing. And for the wing, I'm gonna go ahead and get my black bucktail again. I'm gonna grab some longer pieces this time. Again, don't skimp on the material. You know, most of the time with flies, I always tell people that you use like half the material you actually think and then cut that half in half again and tie them real sparse. But for these Midnight Muddlers, I like a lot of material because I think it pushes more water and creates more disturbance in the water. It makes it easier to find in these low light situations. So grab yourself a chunk of bucktail, about the same size as the one before. Trim it up a little bit. You can stack the hairs some if you need to, if you want to. It's not necessary. But we're gonna tie this in right here on top of everything. And we want the tail, if you have a couple pieces that are, you know, extra long, you can take those out. But we want the most of the hairs of the tail to end right at the same place that our tail does. That's usually what I do. So we'll take that there, and we're gonna tie this in right where it is. And because this is a large amount of material, I'm gonna go ahead and put a drop of super glue again. See if it helps hold that in place. And then take a couple more wraps. Kind of clean that up. Okay, so there's the bottom part of our wing. The next thing we wanna do is take this glow in the dark flash boot here. I'm gonna take a couple strands. I use this white for most of these, unless I'm tying the Midnight Chartreuse, then I'll use this Chartreuse glow in the dark strand. But I'll take 2 strands. I don't put too much. 2 strands, fold it over, so you really have like 4 strands, and then kind of even up the ends. And then we're gonna tie that in to the same length as that bottom part of the wing. Just a couple wraps to hold it in place. Don't need too many. Trim it up. There you go. All right, the next thing we're gonna do the top part of the wing. The top part of the wing, I'm gonna go back to that peacock curl. And I'm gonna go ahead and get a few strands. You can use short ones for this, but I usually tie in about 6 strands on top of the material here for the top part of the wing. So I'll get about 6 strands of the peacock curl. Set it right on top. Tie it to the same length of the wing or just slightly longer. A couple wraps to keep that in place there. Okay. All right, now we got the body, the tail, and the wing. Get all that wrapped up nice and neat. All right, that's the back half of the fly. The front half, now, we're gonna use just like a muddler minnow. Get some deer hair. We're gonna spin some deer hair in a few different clumps. I'm gonna start with black. So I'll take this black deer hair. I cut off a pretty large chunk, about the size of a pencil. Maybe slightly larger to start with. Cut it. I'm not a big, you need to go stack your hair on these muddler minnows. Again, I like it loose, sparse, kind of sloppy because it pushes more water and it makes more disturbance in the water. And anything we can do to help the fish find this fly, I want to do. But I might try to stack it in my hand just a hair. And I tie this first bunch on, a big chunk, with the ends of the hair, not the cut ends, the regular ends of the hair facing backwards, right? So first wrap is kind of loose, tighten it down, and then I'll let it spin. Take a few wraps through there, push it back. Couple thread wraps to build a little dam. Just slightly push it back to pack it in. Okay, just slightly. Again, we don't want it too bunchy and too tight and create too smooth of a head. I like it sloppy. Do the same thing. We get another bunch about that same size, maybe a little bit smaller on this one. I kind of go a little bit smaller as I go towards the front of the fly. Take another bunch, clean out the under hair, the fuzz, the real short hairs. But this time, I tie this bunch in facing the other way, right? With my cut ends facing backwards. So get that bunch, same thing. Loose wrap, and then tighten it down and let it spin. A few wraps through there, mess it up, push it back. Couple wraps for a thread dam. Clean it up a little bit, not too much. And one more, even smaller wrap with the black. And I'll do the same thing, clean it out. Cut ends facing backwards. Push it back. Guys, I am bad at spinning deer hair, bad at trimming deer hair, but it does not matter on these midnight muddlers especially. In fact, I think it helps it create more of a disturbance and it makes a sloppier fly. Anyway, so I do 3 bunches of black, just like that, kind of a little bit smaller each time. And then the very last thing I want to do, and I found out that this kind of helps me, I don't know if it catches more fish, but it helps me see the fly a little bit better, especially when it's dark outside or if you're fishing dark, muddy water. I'll put a little bit of white deer hair right there in front. And I'll put just a little bit of white deer hair right here in front. Spin that in. Pack it in just slightly. And then we'll wrap our thread. That's just for my own visual, so I can see that fly as I'm fishing it back to me. Okay, from there, all we gotta do, take our whip finish. Trim it up, get some fly head cement. I like to use a little bit thinner fly head cements on this, and I might put it on pretty liberally to really soak into those threads. Covered in fly head cement, and then we're gonna go ahead and let that dry, and then we'll come back and trim it up, and I'll show y'all how I go ahead and trim these midnight muddlers. All right, we're back, and the fly head cement has dried. So now what I do is I take all my deer hair that's all loose and stacked it there, and I'll kind of push it and brush it forward. The other thing that you can do that can kind of help out on this a little bit is get one of these hair clips. You know, if you got the good long hair like me, you probably have a bunch of these laying around the house. But anyway, I take that hair clip and I push my hair forward a little bit, and the stuff that I want to leave, all those legs that were sticking forward, some of that deer hair that's sticking back, I'll try to clip that so everything is held back and out of the way. And now what we want to do is trim it up. So I'll get a razor blade, right? A safety razor blade, and I break it in half, and I'll take one of those halves and you kind of round it over. Now on these midnight muddler minnows, I leave the hair longer, sloppier, and kind of just almost as messy as I can get. And if I'll show you some of these, you can see a lot of these are just real long and sloppy, and that's fine with me. So I'll take it, kind of round it over, and then I'll just, start cutting back with what I feel like needs to be trimmed off. And clean it up and just work your way around. It's always better to take off less material at first, and then you can always come back and trim up more later. It's also important to use a sharp razor blade. Don't try to trim up like 3 or 4 flies with the same blade or same half of the blade. Usually I just do 1 blade per fly. So anyway, we're gonna start trimming it up. I'm gonna go ahead and do that. Once you get it kind of trimmed up where you want it, we can take this clip off if it's getting in the way, and you can hold it there. And I'm gonna go ahead and work through this. At the bottom of the fly, I still do it a little bit shorter, just like I would normally when I do my muddler minnows. But you don't have to be too perfect. Just be careful you don't cut your little rubber legs and things like that. And there you go. There you have it. A midnight muddler in the midnight black color variation. Make sure you check out TexasFreshwaterFlyFishing.com for more information on this, guys. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff. It all helps me out. And if you want to pick up a few of these, make sure you check out flydrology.com. And they'll be there for a limited time. Thanks, guys.